Thanks for coming back, and welcome new friends to the In-Between. This is a podcast where we share and talk about third culture and cross-cultural experiences.
Today, we're going to talk about being a TCK in Japan and how we feel when we are traveling and living there. So relax and grab a drink, get comfortable, and surf the wave with us. Right. So we already finished the third episode. Now it's the fourth. And we talk about how to be a TCK in Taiwan. Hopefully you guys enjoy it.
Yes.
And today we're going to talk about being a TCK in Japan.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about my experiences and to share that with everyone. Glad to have everyone back today.
Yeah, being in Japan is actually quite interesting because it's one of the most popular destinations in the world for most of the people in the world, right? So living in Japan, I heard, is a different story.
Right, yeah. Especially these days, I see so many news articles about over-tourism here, and it does feel quite crowded living in Tokyo. You know, as someone who works a regular job, I do definitely feel, especially coming home during the work week, the amount of tourists that are on the train is just so crowded.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people, a lot of people remember or maybe seeing the short video footage about how, during the rush hour in Japan and the workers in the station have to push the people into the train, right? I mean, that's actually a famous thing in the world, I think.
I've actually never seen that yet in person. It must be some other train lines. I myself live more on the west side of Tokyo and commute through a line called the Chuo line, and then I get on this other line that's pretty famous called the Yamanote line, which goes in a circle around Tokyo. But even at the peak hours of the morning or coming back, I've never actually seen the train conductors, the platform workers, push people into the train. Maybe just making sure that they're in, but some of those like iconic images, I'm looking forward to seeing it someday.
I'm just wondering because we've seen that about 10, 15, maybe even 20 years ago. Is such things still happening in Japan? That's what I'm wondering.
Like people being packed into the train?
Yeah, being pushed into the train. And are those platform workers still existing?
I see the workers, definitely. But in terms of pushing, I feel like the people kind of just do it themselves. I'm not proud to say this, but I'm a pusher.
So like AI replaced the human being and you replace the platform pusher. Now you are the person who replaced them.
Because if that train comes and if it's packed, I'm going to pack it some more. I'm getting in.
You are getting in, no matter what. You are getting in. So, this episode is all about you. It's focusing on your story, man. So we already know that you were born in the U.S. and moved to Japan when you were really young. Can you walk us through about your background and your timeline of living abroad?
Of course. Happy to. I did move to Japan at the age of 3. It was due to my kind of mother's employment. And I did live in Japan at that time for about 6 years. And at that point, we had left and we returned back to the U.S., but not to my home state of Indiana, but actually to Hawaii at that time. And yeah, it was a whole another experience as, you could imagine that the culture in Hawaii is vastly different than the culture on the East Coast of America in a state like Indiana, which is landlocked. So I was in Hawaii for a few years and my parents divorced at that time. I had a choice to return to America with my father or to return to Japan with my mother. Since my memories at that time were pretty much all from Japan, as children start forming memories around the age of 3 and 4, I decided to go back to Japan with my mother. We didn't go to Tokyo, though. We went to the countryside, prefecture called Niigata. After that, I was in Japan for another 3 or so years until the middle of my middle school. And then at that point, we did return back to the state of Indiana to see my grandparents, and that's where I began my high school. As our listeners might know, I'm actually back in Japan again as an adult. That's a whole nother experience as well. So I'm happy to share, experiences from, a very young age to leading up to a teenager, as well as an adult living here. So as society has progressed and the world has globalized more, being in Japan feels quite different than it did back in the 90s.
Interesting. Yeah, it's gonna be a part of a discussion further down the road in this episode. So I'm sure you guys can actually get some of the experience of living in Japan from Case. It's going to be interesting. So I'm not too sure if you still remember much about moving to Japan since you were little. From what you do remember, what did you feel like living in Japan at that age, when you were really young? And did you know that you weren't born in Japan back at the time?
Yeah, as far as I can remember, I knew Japan was not where I was from. I have vivid memories of seeing my grandparents and cousins before leaving. And we lived in a small town in Indiana, so I remember the color of their house and the dogs that lived there and my dad's big red Jeep. So
Ooh.
I have a few memories. However, growing up in Japan from the age of 3, I would say, looking back, I was an excited child, a happy child. I was interested in being in a new place. I think I had a pretty easy time making friends, but also making some non-friends as well. But I recall even those people I eventually got along with after we had overcome some difficulties. To me, Tokyo was a playground. My mother said that I would just dart off in the train stations and mix into the crowds. So at some point she bought a leash to keep me from running away.
Are you serious?
I am. Yeah.
Because I literally I met Casey's mom before. She is the type of a lady that I can never think of having a leash on a child. that just doesn't fit the image. Yeah, for your guys' reference.
Just to clarify, it's not like a neck leash, it's more like a body harness.
True. Of course, because especially for a little kid, but still, man, I think a leash. You were that naughty, huh?
I was, fearless apparently.
Wow, yeah. Interesting. Did you notice that you look a little bit different from the kids around you, and how did they treat you? That was how I was wondering big time.
Yeah, it was a mixed experience. There was definitely kids who were excited and happy to have a foreign friend, who thought my blonde golden hair was cool. At that time, I remember watching cartoons on TV such as Dragon Ball, Doraemon, and if you know about Dragon Ball, you know that golden hair means like Saiyajin, where you power
Saiyajin.
up, right?
Yes.
And so the other boys would be like, "Oh, you're Saiyajin," and I definitely took that as a positive thing, right? And I remember one memory when one friend and I were in the back of a car as we were going somewhere. He's like, "Oh, shoot your laser beams from your hair or something." And yeah, just really embracing I did look different. Whereas others were it was more along the lines of, you act different. Why are you so, how can I say, more touchy-feely? Whereas, because, I came from a Western culture and my mom's a big hugger. And, I was more comfortable with physical touch. And, other students who were Japanese, who were all Japanese in my class, at the time, that wasn't so common for them. There was a distance. Those kind of cultural values and norms clashed. Other things that gave me issues were kind of other expectations for politeness. So in Japan, you usually put a kind of ending to someone's name like so-and-so san or sama or chan or kun. And I wasn't really aware of that at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I would call my friend's name by his first name.
Right.
And
just like in America.
And he kept saying something to me called yobiste in Japanese, which means I was calling him but throwing it away. And I just really didn't understand, and I couldn't ask my parents because they didn't understand. I should have asked my teacher, but then again, I wasn't being very resourceful at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these kind of things that took me a while to learn, which other kids learn much quicker, kind of put me at a slight disadvantage.
I see. Wow. That's going to be a culture shock at a young age. For sure.
Right.
Yeah. So throughout the time living in Japan and when you become preteen, is this thing actually still happening or is actually getting a little bit better?
I thought it would get better, but it took a little bit longer than I expected. I guess it just means that cultural adaptation doesn't happen overnight. It takes trial and error and having patient friends that explain these things to you. And they also need to be aware that you may not have easy access to the information or even be aware of these things that could be offending them, right?
Right.
Even when I went back to Hawaii at the age of 9, I was much shyer than the other American boys. And because of that, they thought I was quite strange. And as I tried to adapt to a more of an American lifestyle, when I had gone back to Japan, especially to the countryside where, I was very much kind of a fish out of water.
Okay.
I was a city boy with now some American roots growing, and I tried to exercise a little bit more of my individualism, and that really rubbed them the wrong way. There's this new guy coming in trying to take control, and maybe that's how they saw it, right? That immediately turned me into an outcast. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. At worst case, the Niigata, which is on the Sea of Japan side, gets a lot of snow. So in the winter, they would sometimes maybe show their displeasement by throwing snowballs with hidden presents inside to kind of like chase away the foreigner.
Really?
Kind of thing. So,
wow.
So luckily I was only at that school for 1 year, but that was a really good learning experience for me.
Okay.
Because it wasn't only the students, but also some of the teachers I didn't get along with either. So we did move down one prefecture to Kanazawa, which was a little bit of a bigger city. And there I finally kind of understood how to kind of adjust myself between, collective culture and individual cultures. And at that point, I think I held myself back much more on the first day of school and really took my time. Because of that, I had a much larger group of friends who are more tolerant of how I would slowly shift how I was.
Okay.
But they could see me shifting a little bit day by day. But it was gradual enough that they were okay with it.
So they pretty much have a better tolerance on who you are. And does it really help you? Was it like the biggest time for you to overcome that fear and overcome that challenge?
Yeah, I think so. That was 6th grade. And I think 6th grade was a big turning point for me between how to identify my own culture within myself. I actually want to use an example here. If you've ever owned fish, and if you have to clean the fish tank, you typically take the fish out of the tank first into a bucket of water. And then you need to reintroduce the fish back into the aquarium. Fish owners would know that you just don't throw the fish back in there. You gradually let them adjust to the temperature, and it takes, some time. And I think that was the approach I learned to take once I was in Kanazawa, to slowly adjust to this new environment, these new people, and to them, to me as well.
It goes both ways.
Yes.
It goes both ways. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. I did not know about this, ever since I met you decades ago. Yeah. I did not know that you were throwing snowballs with presents. That was something that I want to do, though. That's for sure.
Please, not me, please.
So after you moving back from Japan, did the life in the U.S. match your expectations? Looking back now, what was the hardest part of the transition? Because you're like a completely different environment and culture.
Looking back now at that, I'm looking right now at the second time we returned for 6th grade and middle school. I would say the hardest part was kind of just finally coming to terms with myself and what my identity was. By that time, people had asked me, "Where are you from?" several times, and I was getting better at answering that question because it was pretty complicated.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Because I didn't feel like I was from Indiana. But I think I would just say, I'm from America at that point.
Okay.
And I think the identity part was challenging. And another part that was challenging for me was the language. And not just Japanese, but also English.
Yeah.
Because I was teeter-tottering between both America and Japan with both education systems. And it was really challenging keeping up with both schooling in that sense. So my parents were definitely worried about my education.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Yeah, this is actually something to think about too. I mean, when a kid is grow up from different culture backgrounds and which one he or she is going to define himself or herself, that's actually a big part that I think a parent should think about. Yeah. I mean, it's actually pretty cool to be multicultural in my point of
Sure.
view.
Yeah.
It is actually really good and it's really cool to be that. But in terms of identification, I always wonder why not a person can define themselves as multicultural. That will actually save a lot of identity crisis. I'm not only from this place, I'm also from the other place, and which is me. I think that's gonna be something interesting to talk about for sure.
I heard once someone say that when you're asked where you're from, you can prepare 3 answers. You can prepare the 5-second answer, the 30-second answer, or the few-minute answer. And
Okay.
it just depends. You always answer with the first one. But if they say like, wait, what? And then they ask you again, then you can do the second one, and then if so, the third one, depending on how interested they are. And I've tried to use that strategy and just say, I'm from America, but I grew up in Japan. And if they ask more, then I'll give them a little bit more, but just to keep it short at first.
Okay. I'll probably use that. So you've lived in 3 places with very different cultures: Japan, Indiana, and Hawaii back in the States. Can you share one of the most memorable cultural experience each place over the year? So maybe 3 of the stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to start with Indiana, actually.
Okay.
This is when we had gone back for high school. And I was fortunate enough to get into an international school on scholarship. So Monday to Friday, I was with a group of international people, other students who might have had similar backgrounds. A lot of the students were from Europe, so more of a Western style culture, but they weren't against my Japanese cultural background. Rather, I think a lot of them found it interesting. But while I was going to the international school, I continued to go to a Japanese school on the weekends. There was also some, factories there where a lot of Japanese parents lived, and they had their children who, went to school, but wanted to also keep up their Japanese education. And my parents had the same thought for me.
Okay.
And so every Saturday, I would go to this Japanese school and continue my high school education at that point. And I ended up graduating from there with a small cohort of students. Yeah.
Okay.
And it was a small class. I think there was less than 10 of us and our whole grade at that point. But we were pretty close because, we had, been going to the same school every Saturday for, 3 years. And we would hang out sometimes as well. And I remember going to one of the Japanese boys' house. I forgot what town it was. But then he had some of his local friends from his high school come over, which I think was a public high school. And they came over, and I think they were a little bit surprised to see me. Why is this white boy here, or something like that? And then his comment was that he's more Japanese than you are.
Oh, wow.
Like, he had really stood up for me.
Okay.
And that was like a really big cultural moment for me, where what I had experienced and lived through in Japan really matters.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a pretty big moment. I don't know if that really kind of answers your question, whether if it's an American moment, but
no, but still, yeah, because it happened in America. It happened in Indiana, right? So
yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. How about in Hawaii?
Hawaii, something impactful. I mean, Hawaii was such a big part of my life because after graduating from high school in Indiana, I actually moved to Hawaii, and I was there for, I want to say, more than 15 years, including some working time as well after college.
Right.
And wow, it's such a that was such an amazing experience because Hawaii in itself is a melting pot of different cultures, and well known. I think it's a much more relaxed atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I felt really at ease. I want to say that I felt most comfortable culturally in Hawaii because there's a strong Asian influence, but also a strong Western influence.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter really what you do or how you act, there's tolerance. If I had to say, Hawaii is a state of tolerance.
Okay.
People there are okay with different cultures, and that people might be a little bit different, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And kind of going through that and meeting so many great people, especially during university, which is where I met Jon here as well.
Of course.
So,
of course.
I wouldn't trade it for anything, living those years in Hawaii.
There's so many memorable cultural experiences in Hawaii for sure. Either it's from our home culture, so for example, Japan, Western, or Taiwan, but also some others as well. Korean, Filipino, some other culture. So this is actually really a good experience to live in Hawaii if you want to learn a lot more about different cultures and stuff. Yeah, I highly recommend a place to live for a few years. Yeah, it's just a little bit more expensive. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's the only
Yeah.
downside, right? Is the
Yeah,
expense. Yeah.
I know. So, I also in Japan, what is the most memorable culture experience? Like, I want to ask you, like, before you move back to the States, not the second time. Well, not the second or the third
Hmm.
time, but more of the first time from your childhood. Because back then, you did not know anything about culture difference or culture shock, but just the most memorable things that you remember when you were little.
Ah, man, when I was still in elementary, right?
Yeah.
Besides the story I shared before, I think it was just about the group culture. And what I want to say is that I was at my friend's house and him and I were misbehaving, but his mom wasn't afraid to give me a smacking either.
Really?
Yeah, she gave me a good old conk on the head, just like she gave her son.
Wow.
And then yeah, it's fine because when I met her at my friend's house, she's my surrogate mom for that moment, right? You know the saying, it
Okay.
takes a village to raise a kid,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So my mom wasn't my only mom, my friend's mom was my mom when I was staying over at their house,
They were
right?
also disciplining you.
Yeah, exactly. And not having those boundaries. And again, it's probably a different period of time and it might be different these days, but it's a fond memory because it just goes to show how, everyone was okay and chill with each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you do the same thing back in the States, the parent that your friend's mom can actually get sued.
Right. Like, I discipline my kid. You don't discipline my kid,
Right. Yeah.
kind
That's
of.
the thing.
But in Japan, it was like more like, this is part of it. It's a group culture. You do it the way you see fit, and we'll work it out. And my mom was totally cool with it. It's like, good. He probably deserved it.
Well, maybe because you were that bad, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a couple rowdy boys, right?
I know. But I want to share that it's actually the same in Taiwan too, because Taiwan society, the culture is heavily influenced by Japanese culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Taiwan, it takes a whole village to raise a kid. That's actually applies the same thing over here. So fast forward to now, after you're living in Japan again. So this is the third time, right? What kind of a reverse culture shock that have you experienced? Tell me the biggest one.
Moving back to Japan as an adult, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the biggest one was, I think, the lack of tolerance or thereof for foreign adults, right? Getting integrated into Japanese society, even if you are married to a Japanese national, it's still challenging. You almost need a sponsor. There's this common thing where there's this catch-22 scenario where you can't get a bank account without a phone number. You can't get a phone number without an address. You can't get an address without a bank account.
Right. Of
So
course.
where do you start, right? And that's where, like, for me, my in-laws' home phone, landline, became that, break in the circle where I could use that to get my bank account and get into the system. So it's challenging when you move here and try to find your place. Coming here as a tourist is fine. It's the honeymoon phase, right? Every time
Yeah.
you get to enjoy. But if you're just trying to live here, going to the city ward office, it's not a good time, right? Everyone knows going to the DMV offices in the States is also not a
Right.
good time, right? All those admin
Right.
tasks. So I think those are pretty much expected. But I guess as a whole, I don't know, as an adult, you're no longer that young blonde boy. Now you're this, adult and you're foreign and, Japanese people tend to like to stick with their groups, right? And it's not that easy to kind of, make new friends, I felt. Japanese people are very polite, don't get me wrong, but there's a difference between being polite and being friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And I really felt that coming back to Japan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. But is this still impacting you either from work or from the new circle of friends that you're making?
I would say it's still very prevalent. I would say the new people I've met right now is mainly through my work. and not through like public encounters so much. Again, it could be me, maybe my openness is not all there as well. But then again, it's easier to make friends in your 20s than it is in your 30s. So, the age also plays a role. I think all things considered, whenever I do travel back to the States, people are generally maybe less polite, but more friendly. And I can really see the difference there. I think it'll take more time, more years before I finally kind of find my footing back in Japan.
Do you think you're like 60, 70% done of that? Or still maybe not even close?
Yeah, sense of community, I think I'm still maybe only kind of finding my feet. You really need to I think those friendships really start to thrive when you keep showing up to the same place, right? And I need to keep working on that as a personal mission, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, it takes time. It takes time to blend in the society or in a certain culture. It doesn't just take overnight to do it. So
exactly. And I've met other foreign people here, and it's easy to make friends with them because you're a small minority of foreigners here living in Tokyo.
Right.
Hey, you're here, you're living great, let's hang out. It's easy. But if you really want to make friends with the locals, it becomes a whole different story.
Definitely. Yeah. Same as different countries too, in Taiwan too, in America as well.
Yeah.
It's never gonna be easy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
but we hope that we share our experience with the audience, so when they face the same situation, they can have a good reference, knowing what to do, knowing what kind of a situation they're in. So this is the purpose of this podcast, actually. Yeah.
I would say, if you're looking to move to Japan either for the first time or you're returning like I was, I think the key is to be patient and expect there will be periods of loneliness depending on who you know or who you're coming with here. And that is important for you to learn the language, to learn the culture, and to find a community and or hobbies that you're interested in. And through consistent cultivation of those relationships, you really find a strong sense of belonging. I think that's what you really need to heart when you're deciding whether or not the move is right.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, but I'm always wondering, with such a rare and unique life experience, what parts of it that have helped you the most in life? And do you think it's easier for you now to adjust when you're moving from one place to another because you have moved to different places?
Yeah, I would say the three words that really come up to my mind is patience, tolerance, because since I've moved so many times, I've lost friends during each of those moves, and you become a little bit more callous to being open to making a new set of friends, right? Because you may leave again.
Right.
And maybe you don't plan to leave again, but you've done it so many times that it becomes part of you.
Right.
So I think those become like internal battles to some degree. And that's one of the curses of being a third culture kid, I think, is while you are tolerant, while you are patient, you also become callous and used to change and moving on somewhere else.
Yeah. There's a place. Sometimes you just know that the place that you are right now is not going to be the place that you're gonna live further down the road, and we're gonna face a goodbye again.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah. But does it make you think easier to move from one place to another now? Like, for example, if you want to, let's just say, not moving out of Japan, but from Tokyo to Osaka, do you think that's easier for you to adjust?
Yeah, I'm sure it would be adjustable. I'm not too scared about moving again. But if you were to ask me, do I want to move again, at least right now, the answer I think is honestly no. I kind of want to have some of that belonging, that sense of belonging, and that sense of community. It would be nice to have some place to call home, like a real home again.
Right. Yeah.
So that would be my honest answer.
Okay. Well, that's good. Because, stability is always a human being is looking for.
Right.
And down the road, there is the stability, and then the way of identifying ourselves is always something that we're looking for sure.
Yeah. Well, one great thing is, we're in the digital age right now. So, communicating overseas, is instantaneous, which is
much
great.
easier. Yeah.
But as good as that is, and as easy it is to make a phone call to talk to your friends or family, wherever they are, it's just something about like, calling up your friend and saying like, hey, you want to meet up this Friday? And just being able to have that close contact with someone is super valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And, we all experienced that during university time, high school, right? Where all
Yeah.
of the people you knew, your best friends, were all there in the same place.
Right.
And it's a great time. But the more you move, the less you have of that until you decide to settle down in some place, start rebuilding that community.
Mm-hmm.
And those
Mm-hmm.
are the hard choices people need to make as they navigate.
Right. Yeah. Now it's actually a different feeling from reaching out, right now and compared to before. Yeah, definitely. But I also wondering, so looking back now, what would you tell your younger self, the version of you who had just moved back to the States from Japan? Is there better preparation for life in America if you do want to move back to an America then?
Oh man, that's a hard question. So if I were to tell my younger self who just moved back to America, I'm assuming in high school, for example, at that point, I feel like I was pretty okay with the whole cultural identity at that point. I was where I probably needed to be at that time. I think it would be to think a little bit more deeply of now you know who you are, but who do you want to be in the future? And to kind of take time and ask yourself or, talk to friends and family of where your life experiences might lead you to and what your strengths were. I think personally, I took too much time trying to figure out what I wanted to do, which is a classic case for, teenagers, knowing what they want to do. But to take more time to figure out what that is earlier on and kind of decide, and to not decide, but to understand what your cultural identity is and embrace it. And don't worry about fighting who you're supposed to be or how you're supposed to act, and just to be yourself. Because I feel like cross-cultural kids may try to put on a outer face or outer wall and act in a certain way that kind of fits that culture. And
Yeah, definitely.
while it's important to adapt, at some point you have to start kind of just being yourself, because it's just so tiring to pretend to act in that way of that culture every time and shift back and forth. Because then at that point you're not being yourself; you're just putting on a mask every time.
Right. Yeah. That happens to most of the third culture kids, including us.
Yeah. So those would be like big life lessons I would say I would want to
Good
tell my
one.
younger self.
Now you're back in Japan a few years ago. Knowing what you know right now, what would you tell the 200, was it 2022 when you moved back? So what would you tell that kind of yourselves to be aware of living in Japan, knowing what you know right now? Like, is there something that you can be more cautious? Is something that you can be more advice?
I think day-to-day life, I wouldn't really have too much to say. It's the same stuff, right? You ride the trains, you interact with the people, you get through the day, you get through the years. But one thing, if I could go back in time and maybe focus on it a little bit more, was maybe joining a local community or volunteering and just trying to put myself out there with the people a little bit more, and stop trying to wait for something to happen.
That sounds like a really life advice instead of a like just in Japan kind of advice.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I think it especially applies to Japan because it is a country of collectivism, and hence, if you join a community and are consistent in showing up, then it's likely you'll be more welcome, at least in the
I
group.
see.
Right.
Yeah, you need to show yourself kind of a thing.
And you can't just show
Yeah.
up one day and make a huge impact and expect that to, make you one of them. It's
Takes time.
It's a slow burn.
Right. Consistency. Yeah, they see that. They see what they call like it's if the person is doing such things from the heart or not. If you do it from the heart, then you do it consistently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. A lot of Asian cultures are really seeing that as a point.
Hmm.
Yeah. But so what thoughts and advice would you share with the people who are experiencing culture shock or reverse culture shock, wherever they are living right now? Because I'm sure that you're pretty much, you're aware of culture shock and reverse culture shock. And, I see you doing that as an expert. So what's your thoughts and advice if people are experiencing anywhere in the world right now?
I think it's a bittersweet piece of advice, but the fact of the matter is, if you are not from there and you look different, you will never be one of them. And I've come to terms with that in Japan as well. I would never be a Japanese person, no matter how hard I try. And I think it's important to be okay with that earlier than later, right? I knew someone who became a Japanese citizen, had a Japanese passport, learned the language inside and out, all the cultural nuances. He knew more than most Japanese people did, but he was still foreign. Not on paper, but at least in the mindsets of the people who looked at him. Yeah. And so anyway, while that's not a very happy note, it is the truth. The positive part is, if you're okay with that earlier on, then you can relax and just enjoy being there and enjoy being with the people who do know you and who do accept you, right? And what you need to keep in mind is you need to be the bigger person and to be okay and open to criticism that you may receive. Just take it with a grain of salt. Keep on going, respect the culture, keep practicing the language, and you'll be fine.
Hope this advice is gonna go around the world, man. Yeah, because people are experiencing culture shock and reverse culture shock almost every single day, I would say, unless the person is staying at home. Seriously. Yeah, and it's happening anywhere around the world, and that can create conflicts or that can create harmony. So having the right mindset to deal with culture shock is actually the key for people to communicate with each other. That's what I believe. This is what I believe. So, like you said, being a bigger person to tolerance or accept other culture or other perspectives, it's very important between different human beings. Doesn't matter with the race, doesn't matter with the citizenship, doesn't matter with the culture, but just working as a group, working as a whole, it's so important, so important. Yeah. So, well, we hope this episode is giving you really deeper thought or a clear path of what you are doing or what you're dealing with right now in the world, anywhere you are. And we're so happy to tell you guys that we're not only on Spotify right now, but we're also on YouTube. We'll just set it up with those two channels. Just search for In Between or the In Between for our channel. And feel free to leave a comment and tell us what you think or what you're experiencing right now, or even what you had experienced before. So we can discuss about it, or maybe we can talk about it in the future episodes. So Case and I are going to discuss about it frequently, and hopefully we can make more episodes about your topics or maybe other friends' topics in the future.
For sure.
So yeah, we're looking forward to the future of this podcast. All right, that's it for today, and thanks for listening to this episode. We'll see you next time.
Shoot.
Shoot.